Let's turn now to Avi Melamed. He's a Middle East geopolitical intelligence analyst. He's also the founder of Inside the Middle East, a nonprofit dedicated to providing an apolitical, non-partisan education system about the region. And he's joining us from Tel Aviv. Avi, good to see you again. Thank you for making time.
Hello, Natasha. Thank you for having me.
Avi, I wonder if we could actually begin with something that we're anticipating to take place in a short while, which is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is going to be holding a press conference. This is highly anticipated. Many people want to hear what he's going to say. What are you going to be listening for? What do you think he's going to say?
Well, first, it's very significant because for the first time, for a long period of time, he's also going to take questions from the journalists. So it's very significant. Along Mr. Netanyahu, there is going to be also the Mr. Gantz and Minister of Defense Gallant. I believe that he will basically reiterate some of the messages that Israel has been conveying, meaning Hamas is demanded to release immediately all the hostages, reminding you this is a terror organization that keeps babies and kids and women and old people as an insurance policy. This is totally unacceptable upon the world. And the second thing, I guess, that he will reiterate is Israel's determination to move ahead and to basically eradicate Hamas military capacities and to change reality in Gaza Strip. This, I think, will be the major messages in his statement.
One of the concerns that's come up repeatedly is how the hostages and the hostage situation has been handled, particularly by Prime Minister Netanyahu, that he took too long to meet with the families of people whose family members have been taken hostage. We know that he met with some of the families today. What is happening on that front?
Well, I think that Netanyahu has actually to try to find a way to package what I believe is the Israeli policy vis-a-vis the challenge of the hostages. And I think that the Israeli policy, to put it in a nutshell, is as following. Israel will fight this war against Hamas as if there are no hostages, and Israel will negotiate and do everything possible to release the hostages as if there is no war with Hamas.
So what is the bigger priority? I think a lot of people are wondering.
I don't know to say in terms of bigger, because these are simultaneously, these are two different trajectories, but at the same time, they're also intertwined or integrated. But it's very clear to me that in the end of the day, as part of the whole large scheme of things, international community, the world, humanity cannot accept a situation when a terror organization is kidnapping babies, kids, women, and old people and use them as insurance policy. And I believe that there is a need to provide this message loud and clear to Hamas, and it has to be done in different ways, including, by the way, of course, the military pressure.
Another sentiment that we're hearing loudly and clearly from much of the world is aid needs to get through, that ordinary Gazans need to have access to food, water, electricity, cell phone systems, just a decent basic way of living. And right now they have limited to virtually no access to those things. They are in danger right now. Will Netanyahu acknowledge this? Will there be any kind of accommodating for aid to get in?
There are accommodations to that. Israel definitely recognizes and acknowledges the need to address the challenges of the Gaza people who are not involved in the war. You just mentioned earlier the fact that Israel has been time and time again warning the Gaza people to leave the northern part of Gaza and to move to the south part of Gaza. One of the major challenges we are all familiar with is the fact that Hamas is using its own people as a human shield. And we know there are evidence that Hamas has been proactively preventing civilians to move from the northern part of Gaza Strip to the southern part. In addition to that, as we all know, Israel enabled and will increase the convoys of humanitarian aid to people in Gaza Strip. Israel doesn't have a war with the people of Gaza Strip. Israel has a war with Hamas, who controls in Gaza Strip. Hamas ISIS is a dangerous, brutal organization, and we have to address this challenge accordingly.
I think for many, the question becomes the degree to the challenge of Hamas and what's the cost of it. So this is the concern. Israel has said repeatedly, as you've reiterated now, that they're not at war with ordinary civilians in Gaza. But nevertheless, from what we understand, ordinary civilians in Gaza are dying and will likely continue to die as this war escalates. We've heard from IDF representatives that there are multiple stages to this war, and as of today, we're at the next stage. There's more ground incursions, there's more strikes. There's just more war, and that will likely lead to more death on the ground. Is there a way to minimize the impact on civilians?
Israel is doing an enormous efforts to really minimize collateral damage. I want to say something in that perspective. Israel is dealing with the challenge that is called Hamas-ISIS for almost 50 years. Let me reiterate it, 50 years. Dozens of thousands of Israeli civilians and Palestinians, innocent people, paid with their life because of the fact that Hamas-ISIS has been able up until now to dictate its radical agenda. Unfortunately, Israelis and Palestinians, innocent people, people that want to have life and to have future for the kids, they found themselves caught in a crossfire, in the line of fire, because Hamas-ISIS is actually dictating this radical agenda. So on the one hand, yes, Israel as a democracy is doing an enormous effort to try and really minimize the collateral damage. This is a brutal war. It's unfortunate. In war, people are get killed. But the international community and the world must understand that in the end of the day, you must eliminate Hamas-ISIS in order to enable Israelis and Palestinians a future of hope. There is no other way than that. The last almost 50 years of confronting Hamas-ISIS taught us once and time again that this murderous organization is only inflicting death, destruction, and havoc upon both Israelis and Palestinians. International community should be aware of that fact.
Okay. Avi Melamed, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Natasha, for having me. Good night.
Good night.